My name is Jan Sargeant, and like Christine, I work in the area of animal health, and I'm also going to talk about big data. But I'm going to talk about it with a completely different twist, and I'm going to argue that the scientific literature itself is big data, and that can really help us in the animal health world. So just to set the stage, what is the issue, or what is the problem we're trying to solve here? And in animal health, as in every other medical field and many other fields, it's increasingly the expectation that our decisions are going to be evidence-based or evidence-informed. And what that means is we're going to use the results of research to aid in making appropriate decisions in a timely manner. That sounds fine, but what is the problem? And in the past, I think the problem we had to deal with is there was very little research to support many of the decisions that we wanted to make. Nowadays, the problem is the opposite. With the explosion in publications, we, in many cases, now have too much information. So as an example, suppose that a beef farmer has an animal who has pneumonia and calls a veterinarian, and the veterinarian has to decide what antibiotic he should use to treat this animal. A quick search of the scientific literature revealed that there's somewhere over 1,300 research articles that address this question. Clearly, there aren't enough hours in the day for the veterinarian to read and assemble and amalgamate all of that information to make an evidence-informed decision. So where does big data fit into this? And we often think of big data in the context of the 4 V's: volume, velocity, variety, and veracity. And several other speakers in today's forum have talked about big data in this context. So let's look at that in the context of the scientific literature. If we start with the volume, or the amount of information, we access scientific literature by looking at various electronic databases that serve as portals. And if we look at one of these, which is called PubMed, there's approximately 26 million research articles that you can access through that electronic portal, and that's one of dozens of these portals that we have. If we zero in on the medical literature and medical decision-making, there's over 20,000 biomedical journals that publish more than 2 million articles a year. So clearly, we have the volume V. If we look at the velocity, or the frequency with which this data is being generated, what this graph shows is the number of journals and the number of scientific publications being published over time, and we can see that it's increased exponentially over the past several years. So we have the velocity V when we talk about the scientific literature. When we talk about variety, there's just an astounding number of different types of ways we can do research. And this spans from things like case reports, where we identify maybe an unusual type of disease, through to laboratory experiments where we come up with ideas and try to prove them as a proof of concept, right up to clinical trials where we test these ideas in real-world situations, and everything in between. So there's an incredible variety of data in the scientific literature. And finally, veracity, which speaks to the quality of that data. And I think veracity and variety should probably be used together in terms of scientific literature, because there's an incredible range of quality out there as well. We certainly can assess the quality of scientific literature, and the screenshot here shows just a half dozen of a very large number of different quality assessment checklists. So it's something that we can evaluate, but it takes an incredible amount of time to do so. So where does that leave us? And if in the past, I think for those of us veterinarians or farmers who want to make evidence-informed decisions, it left us struggling to keep up to date to make those decisions appropriately. But luckily, there is a big data solution. And this is the area where myself and others are currently conducting research. And that's the field of evidence synthesis, which includes systematic reviews, meta-analysis, and network meta-analysis. This is an internationally recognized methodology, and it's used to identify literature that addresses a question, select the specific articles that will address that question, assess their quality, and hopefully statistically combine them to come up with a single answer, so that that veterinarian or producer only has to read one paper. And just a couple of examples here. In the first case, this graph shows a simple question of what antibiotic should, or if you have an antibiotic to treat that animal with pneumonia, how effective is that antibiotic? So each of the lines represents a single research study, and at the bottom in the diamond, we've mathematically combined them, we've come up with one answer, and that is how effective that antibiotic is. In the real world, the decision's often a lot more complex. There's actually quite a number of different antibiotics that you can use to treat pneumonia in cattle. And so we can extend it to a network meta-analysis, where we use the literature to look at every possible combination of antibiotics, and where there is no literature, to infer what the relationship should be. And then we can come up with a list of what is the relative efficacy of the different choices. Again, a single answer for the veterinarian or producer needing to make an evidence-informed decision. In the human healthcare literature, these methodologies have been used for several decades, and in fact are arguably the norm for medical decision-making. But it's a relatively new application in animal health. And this graph again shows a number of publications, but this is systematic reviews in the animal health field. And you can see that in about the past 10 years, there's been a real explosion in this field. And I'm proud to say that quite a number of those publications come from researchers here at Guelph. One of the problems, though, is that it's a very labor-intensive process. You have to identify those 1,300 articles. You have to make sure they're answering the specific question. You have to assess their quality, extract the data, and put it all together statistically. And so it's actually a very labor-intensive process. And that is a barrier to producing more of these. However, it's a very exciting time in the big data field because we do have both automation and artificial intelligence becoming more and more feasible. And so what we're looking at now is using web crawlers to go through those thousands of articles that are published every day and look for ones that address our research question. And then we're using artificial intelligence to screen them for relevance and to extract the data. And so I think what we're going to see in the not too distant future, and already starting to see, is we're going to automate the process of identifying and synthesizing the literature, and that this information will feed directly into our systematic reviews, updating the final answer, if you will, in real time or close to it. And then we'll be able to feed these systems into animal-side decision tools that the producer can use and look into them and provide the very latest research evidence in order to inform their decisions. And when I say the not too distant future, I think what we're looking at is 2 to 5 years, and we'll see these systems coming online. So it's a very exciting time to be involved in big data in animal health. And I think that, that as these technologies come on board, not only are we going to be able to make better decisions, but it's going to lead to improved animal health and welfare. Thank you.